Hey, this is Kelly of Road Chief Clothing, and this is Horace Butlar, the writer of When Rocks Cry Out. Now, he's telling you that Egypt and the Hebrew Israelites is over here in America and how the Egyptians was over here, and he's going to talk about it from a African or Afrocentric point of view because he's utilizing the Out of Africa theory. So, keep in mind that's where he's coming from, and he's coming from the stance of that the Egyptians and the Hebrews and so on and so forth, that those people came out of Africa over here to America. But the truth is, that was revealed by UB TV News, is that the Egyptians, they already was over here. And according to the book Queen Mu and the Sphinx, they talk about America being the first continent that was submerged underneath the water, but had popped up first out of all the continents. So therefore, America is the oldest continent on the face of the earth. And we know also by previous videos that I did, and that the pyramids and the human remains over here in America is older than the ones over in Africa. Okay? So keep that in mind when you're listening to this. And also keep in mind the facts that UB News basically told you, that the Egyptians and the Hebrews, that they are from here. They didn't come from Africa over to here, but they was originally from the Americas.
Labyrinth still there, found by archaeologists, and they eventually said this city was one of the largest cities. No, they said it was the largest city on the planet up until the 8th century AD. Largest city on the planet at 7 square miles. But they're not there. They're near. They're in Mexico, where Mexico City is now, built on top of those ancient African ruins. And now they found the ruins of ancient Memphis and rebuilt their city there, calling it after the old biblical name of Enoch. They pronounce it Tenochtitlan, but it's spelled T-E-N-O-C-H, Enoch, to Enoch, Titlan. So they own this old African city that dates to Genesis of the African writings that we call biblical writings. And they're in this city that was Enoch's city and was also Memphis. And they built their city there. And that becomes the capital city that we start hearing is the Aztec capital city. You have these Africans here. So when Spain comes in, they know exactly where they're going. They know what the history of this is. Their church has those books. They have the writings. You have to understand that once you understand that when the Africans had come into the Americas and built their cities that became known as ancient Egypt, then you're not going to only find Memphis, you're going to find that other capital city called this, sitting on the Yucatan Peninsula. You're going to find the African city called Troy, sitting in Central America. You're going to find the ancient city called Thebes, sitting in South America. That's why they call it Upper Egypt. And in the southland of the two lands called Tamaric, North America and South America. So you have Thebes in the south as the capital. You have Memphis in the north. And once you understand that ancient Thebes is hidden under the eventual name of Jerusalem, because those ancient Africans had first built that city in honor of Heru, Amen's son, not Osiris' son, Amen's son, Heru. And we called it after Heru. And we flipped that H and J one time to give you from Heru to Jeru in the district of Salim. No, you're in Jerusalem, just the way some of the ancient writings still show that name. So you have Jerusalem, Thebes, sitting in South America. And you have Memphis sitting where Mexico City is sitting now. Now, you have to understand now. Now, when you have your crusades, you are coming into the Americas. You already know Jerusalem is in South America because you've been here before. Egypt had been here. Europe had been here. Rome had been here. Persia had been here. Babylon had been here. Everybody knew about the Americans. When they came in with the Crusades, they went to capture the ancient African city of Jerusalem in South America. But every time they do it, now they had good success at first crusade because they caught the brothers squabbling like they're still squabbling among each other over the different sects and different beliefs. And when they catch you divided like that, they just whoop all of you. So they came in and they were able to capture this ancient African great city, a city in South America called Jerusalem, because they caught the brothers squabbling. Now, when they tried it again, after they had been run out of the Americas, they came in again, and now they're trying to do it, and they find out the brothers have a strategy. Now they're working together. When they tried to besiege that fortress city of Jerusalem in South America in that high mountain, now the brothers from Mexico comes up behind them, these armies, and sandwiches them in. And now they get defeated, and they keep trying that. They keep saying, you know what, we finally run out of luck on capturing Jerusalem. It wasn't that you're running out of luck. The brothers had started working together, and now there's a strategy. So when in the 1500s they say, you know what, I think what we need to do to be able to take these African cities and lands and all the riches and the drugs and the cocaine and everything else that's in the Americas to start making that money again, to get that land, I think we need to go and whoop the army in Memphis first and Mexico first. So when we go down and attack Jerusalem this time, we won't get sandwiched in. So in this invasion in the 1500s, here the ships come. And they come into Mexico, and you see all the books, and they say the invasion and conquest of Mexico and Peru. But now something should have clicked in your brain right then. When you see Mexico, you don't see Peru right next door. Peru is not in Texas. It's hidden. It's hidden on the far side of South America, on the Pacific side. You can't even reach it coming through the Caribbean. Not in your ships. So here you go. How do you know where Peru is and you just found Mexico? They know. They know exactly where Jerusalem was. But they were going to knock out the armies at Mexico and then take the armies down to South America and then conquer Jerusalem. But now they have to hide this now. Because if you are the church, and you're saying you have a right to come in and conquer and destroy and mutilate and slaughter these people in the Americas and have the church's blessing out of Italy, the Rome there, you better have some kind of good justification if you're trying to say that you're humane. So they come in and they say, well, we're going to introduce them to the religion of Christianity. And so, it's going to give them a benefit. So we can do these things because we eventually, the whole thing is we're going to save them. We're going to save their souls. And they certainly can't tell you that they came in and destroyed Jerusalem. But the Vatican had an interest. Because when the church was developing in the Christian world, there were 12 churches. 11 of them are in the Americas, and one alone is there in Italy. But they wanted to be the head, and the 11 churches in the Americas would never allow it and would always vote as a block against it. Now, if you can wipe out the 11, you can become the head. So they had a vested interest in the destruction of the churches and the cities in the Americas. And Spain, of course, wanted the riches and the land. And so you knock out the armies at Mexico, you go down to Peru, and you knock out Jerusalem and wipe that city clean and rob it blind. But now you have to hide the histories so you won't be accused of destroying Jerusalem. And that's what was done. knew that these were not Aztecs. Aztec means these people were worshiping the ancient religion of Sutek, that some also believe is Set, ancient Set, and Set. If you go deeper, you'll find that this Set is also Cain in the ancient biblical writings called Genesis. Cain, that they spell as C-A-I-N, but in the other African records that we now call Egypt, he's called K-H-O-N, Khan, Su, who slays his brother Osiris, who is the biblical Abel. That's why in the biblical writings, these African writings that they keep trying to give to somebody else to say that they're theirs, in these African writings, you find two worships going on, more than that, but two major ones. In South America, Amen has become the church of power. In Central America, where Heru was given the rule of Lower Egypt, it's Heru and Isis and Osiris, who was Abel, who is then called Baal and El. So you have El in Central America, you have Amen in South America, and when the Persians and the Babylonians came over and whooped the brothers in Central America, and those African cities fell, and some who survived and escaped that slavery went into South America and joined that group. They brought their books, combined them, and in those writings now we have two names for the ancient deity of Amen. We have Amen and Yah and Yahweh and all the other names, and we also see it being called El, because they were worshiping Osiris, El, as Baal, as Cain, as Khan in the north.
Then the tree splits unevenly into many branches and the canopy, essentially making it unfit for the stability necessary to serve as a single pillar to be laid in the foundation of the temple. Concerning the antiquity of these trees, the oldest cedars of Lebanon are thought to be as old as 1,000 years old. Does this make them the vintage trees of the forest of antiquity? Does this make them the trees planted by the Lord? Does this make them the trees of the fire prophecy? The cedar is a parable from Judges chapter 9. So just to summarize what's going on in the story, Abimelech, the son of Jerubbaal, and being discontent with what he saw as lack of political opportunity or lack of royal opportunity, he enlists his mother's family to do him a favor. So Judges chapter 9 explains this story, and it wraps it up in this parable about the bramble and the cedar. So I'm just going to read through the first part of the chapter, and we'll summarize the later part of the chapter. Quote, chapter 9, And Abimelech the son of Jerubbaal went to Shechem unto his mother's brethren, and with all of the family of the house of his mother's father, saying, Speak, I pray you, in the ears of all the men of Shechem, whether it is better for you that all the sons of Jerubbaal, which are 70 persons, reign over you, or that one reign over you. Remember also that I am of your blood and of your flesh. You see what he's doing here? He went to his mother's side of the family, the men on the mother's side of the family, and he's saying, is it better that the 70 sons of Jerubbaal rule over you, or that one man rule over you? Now remember, I'm actually related to you through the mother. And And his mother's brethren spake of him in the ears of all the men of Shechem all these words, and their hearts were inclined to follow Abimelech, for they said, he is our brother. They said, he is our brother. And the irony about that is they weren't actually brothers. They were more like uncles and cousins. They were of his mother's flesh and bone, as opposed to being of Jerubaal's flesh and bone. And they gave him 70 pieces of silver, 70 pieces of silver out of the house of Baal-berith. Doesn't the house of Baal-berith sound a lot like B'nai Berith? But I digress. Wherewith Abimelech hired vain and light persons which follow him. So his mother's brothers or his mother's brethren gave him some silver, wherewith Abimelech hired vain and light persons which followed him. And he went into his father's house at Ophrah, and slew his brethren the sons of Jerubbaal, being 70 persons upon one stone. So he hired light and vain men to go kill his brethren upon one stone. Notwithstanding, Jotham, the youngest of Jerubbaal, was left, for he hid himself. And all the men of Shechem gathered together all the house of Millo, and went and made Abimelech king by the plain of the pillar that was in Shechem. So he hired the vain men to go kill his brethren. Now I want to make this point, that these are his actual brethren who are in line to rule. These are actually his brothers through his father. The only difference is his mother was a concubine, therefore he can't rule. So he teamed up with the cousins and uncles on the mother's side to kill his actual brothers. And all the men of Shechem gathered together and all the house of Millo, and went and made Abimelech king by the plain of the pillar that was in Shechem. And when they told it to Jotham, he went and stood on the top of the Mount Gerizim, and lifted up his voice and cried, and said unto them, Hearken unto me, ye men of Shechem, that God may hearken unto you. So after hearing all this, they killed his brethren, and he got away. They killed his brethren on one stone, he gets away. Then they go make Abimelech king, and then he goes to the mountain and yells down. Jotham had some courage, obviously, because these were the men who had paid to have his brothers killed. So here's the parable. The trees went forth on a time to anoint a king over them. And they said to the olive tree, Reign thou over us. But the olive tree said unto them, Should I leave my fatness wherewith by they honor God and man, and go be promoted over the trees? And the trees said to the fig tree, Come thou and reign over us. But the fig tree said unto them, Should I forsake my sweetness, my good fruit, and go be promoted over the trees? And then the tree said to the vine, Come thou and reign over us. And the vine said unto them, Should I leave my vine, which cheereth God and man, and go be promoted over the trees? And then all the trees said unto the bramble, Come thou and reign over us. And the bramble said unto the trees, If in truth ye anoint me king over you, then come and put your trust in my shadow. And if not, let fire come out of the bramble and devour the cedars of Lebanon. I want to stop here, because before we know that the fire devours the cedars of Lebanon, we just think it's trees. We just think it's regular trees. We're not quite sure, even though we know it was a fig tree, right? And we know it was a vine, but we didn't have any idea of the actual tree that was looking to have a king over him. This gets into the parable now. Now, therefore, if ye have done truly and sincerely, in that ye have made Abimelech king, and if ye have dwelt well with Jerubbaal and his house, and have done unto him according to the deserving of his hands, for my father fought for you, and adventured his life far, and delivered you out of the hand of Midian. And ye have risen up against my father's house this day, and have slain his sons, 70 persons upon one stone, and have made Abimelech the son of his maidservant king over the men of Shechem, because he is your brother? If ye have dwelt truly and sincerely with Jerubbaal and his house this day, then rejoice in Abimelech, and let him also rejoice in you. But if not, let fire come out from Abimelech, and devour the men of Shechem and the house of Millo. And let fire come out from the men of Shechem and from the house of Millo, and devour Abimelech. And Jotham ran away and fled and went to Beer and dwelt there for fear of Abimelech his brother. You see how Jotham set up the curse? If you have dealt fairly with the sons of Jerubbaal, then rejoice in Abimelech. But if you have not dealt fairly with the sons of Jerubbaal, let fire come to Abimelech and the houses of Milo and the men of Shechem. So I'm going to jump into the last verses of the chapter just to let you know how the story ends. Verse 50, chapter 9, Judges. Then went Abimelech to Thebez and encamped against Thebez and took it. But there was a strong tower within the city, and thither fled all men and women and all they of the city, and shut it to them, and got them up to the top of the tower. And Abimelech came unto the tower and fought against it, and went hard into the door of the tower to burn it with fire. And a certain woman cast a piece of millstone upon Abimelech's head, and brake his skull. Then he called hastily unto the young man his armor bearer, and said unto him, Draw thy sword and slay me, that men may not say of me, A woman slew him. And his young man thrust him through, and he died. And when the men of Israel saw that Abimelech was dead, they departed, every man into his place. Thus God rendered the wickedness of Abimelech, which he did unto his father, in slaying his 70 brethren. And the evil of all the men of Shechem did God render upon their hands, and upon them came the curse of Jotham, the son of Jerubbaal. The chapter ends with Abimelech being killed by a woman with a single rock. Thus the curse of Jotham rendered unto Abimelech the same fate that Abimelech rendered unto his brethren. So in regards to how this story pertains to the prophecy of the bramble and the cedar, another interesting point that we don't learn until the end of the chapter was that the men of Shechem, Abimelech's mother's brethren, were Israelites. Similar to how we don't find out until the end of the parable that the trees looking to be ruled by the bramble were the cedars of Lebanon. And when the men of Israel saw that Abimelech was dead, they departed, every man unto his place. So this relates to the prophecy because these men, being Israelites, were the cedars who had chosen Abimelech, the bramble, to rule over them. And we don't find out that they are men of Israel until the end of the chapter. Similar to how we don't find out that the trees are cedars of Lebanon until the end of the parable. This is a living prophecy, and it is still being played out unto this day under the fires of Lebanon.
Teams of firefighters are racing against time to save historic redwoods from a raging wildfire tearing through the Sequoia National Forest. The threat intensifying in recent days after lightning strikes ignited 2 uncontrollable wildfires, which merged into one massive blaze. The KPN complex fire has already torched over 23,000 acres. Firefighters struggling to get the upper hand.
It's incredibly steep. The fuels are incredibly dry. All of that makes this a very difficult fire to fight, very dangerous.
The burn area visible from space as it closes in on the so-called giant forest, home to General Sherman, the largest tree in the world. The giant sequoia, which is over 2,000 years old and stands towering 200 so-called giant forest, home to General Sherman, the largest tree in the world. The giant sequoia, which is over 2,000 years old and stands towering 275 feet high, almost as tall as the Statue of Liberty, has attracted tourists from around the world. The flames creeping closer, crews covered the base of its massive trunk with fire-resistant wrapping in an effort to protect it. As those once awed by the forest's beauty,
Look at that! Look at that!
now shocked by the threat of devastation.
The fear is that you won't be able to see wonder in nature the way that people 100 generations before you saw it.
Officials say the fire has already burned the inside of these trees, rooted just a few hundred feet from General Sherman, and the threat not isolated. Another fire burning just 40 miles to the south has swallowed over 25,000 acres and threatens more giant sequoias. This area is no stranger to this kind of destruction. Just last year, California's Castle Fire alone incinerated 10% of the world's giant sequoia population.
The wildfires that we're seeing are not natural anymore. They're amplified as a result of human choices and human activity.
Now, as the flames rage, the race is on to protect these towering treasures.
So let's continue this conversation on the method of preservation used over here in America. Charlton's Web quote, Prometheus was the oldest known non-clonal organism, a Great Basin bristlecone pine tree growing near the tree line on Wheeler Park in eastern Nevada, United States. The tree was at least 4,862 years old and possibly more than 5,000, was cut down in 1964 by a graduate student in the U.S. Forest Service personnel for research purposes. That's right, for research purposes. Those involved did not know of its world record age before the cutting. They didn't know. It was just a tree to them, and the circumstances and decision-making process remain controversial. The tree's name refers to the mythological figure Prometheus, who stole fire from the gods and gave it to man. The designation WPN 114 was given by the original researcher, Donald Russ Curry, and it means the 114th tree sampled in his research in Nevada's White Pine Country. End quote. The reason why this tree is so significant on the eastern tree line of Nevada is that it is a great bristlecone pine. And of course, this tree was 5,000 years old, or more, or less. This tree and this tree's location is very significant. And why is this tree and this tree's location in Wheeler Park in eastern Nevada so significant? Because Methuselah in California is completely across the state, nearly on the border between what? California and the edge of Nevada. So we have these two ancient species of bristlecone pine trees on the edge of the desert. Isaiah 41:19. I will plant in the wilderness the cedar, the shittah tree, and the myrtle, and the oil tree, and I will set in the desert the fir tree, and the pine, and the box tree together. The pine. He will set in the desert the pine and the fir tree. Oh, what about the fir tree? It just so happens that fir trees grow right there in the middle of the desert. The fir tree in the desert, along with the pine, along with the box tree. According to most biblical scholars, they don't even know what a box tree is. But I have a feeling it's one of these random trees that grow in the desert. As it refers to the cedar in the wilderness, the shittah tree, the myrtle, and the oil tree. Cedar trees are aromatic and are used to make oil, in reference to Hosea 14:6. All of these are found in the same area, right there on the border of the desert. So it almost seems like these locations aren't arbitrary, because you have to go the entire desert to find another grove of trees so ancient. Going back to Isaiah, in the previous verse, I will open up rivers in high places and fountains in the midst of the valleys, and I will make the wilderness a pool of water and the dry land springs of water. So what is this referring to? I will open up rivers in high places and fountains in the midst of the valleys, and I will make the wilderness a pool of water and the dry land springs of water. We already know there are plenty of springs in these areas, springs within the desert. That same desert in Nevada was once full of water. Now it is made dry, and he has springs of water. from the other end of Nevada all the way to California, hence Palm Springs. And of course, Palm Springs
opened up the coffin and found a skeleton of a man holding a little box. It was about 8.10 inches in size. The box had been cemented shut here. This, by the way, is sitting in Ohio. Well, he opened up the box and he found a little man inside, a little black stone. They took it to scholars and they looked at it. The man seems to be carrying something, and there's writing here at first they couldn't recognize. The writing is, they thought in 1860, some sort of Hebrew. Well, finally, about 20 years later, they found some rabbis living in the area, and the rabbis looked at that, and they could read it. They said it was an old kind of block Hebrew, and it was a rendition of the Ten Commandments.
These are the holy stones of Ohio. The oldest known record of the Ten Commandments was found in America, written in ancient Hebrew script dating back to the time of Solomon.
This right here also, of course, you'll recognize the top image. That's the Anthon transcript that is so well known regarding the story about the sealed portion of the book I Cannot Read by Professor Anthon, of course, coming out of the Old Testament. Here we have the Anthon transcript on the left. Notice the characters in that vertical roll. And now look to the right. The right characters are from what's called the Mik'Mak Indians, who are also Algonquin, upstate New York into Maine and early lower part of Canada. When the Jesuit priests came into this country, they found the Mik'Mak writing this language, and this was what's called their symbols. It was identified by Dr. Barry Fell in the 1970s as a form of Egyptian Hieratic, and then he also called it Reformed Egyptian of all things. And here's a few characters, 17 compared side by side. They're so very close, they're almost exact. In some cases, a few of them are exact. But here it is, in North America, in New England, Algonquin people again, and another parallel for the Book of Mormon, Egyptian Hieratic, and we have non-LDS scholars doing the work, and they're actually calling it Reformed Egyptian, coming out of North America. Another testament to the Book of Mormon.
Emerged from the bosom of the deep. The country of the chute and the Egyptians, according to Herodotus, boasted that their ancestors in the lands of the West were the oldest men on earth. Now we're going to pause right there. Now, you have the Egyptians, according to Herodotus, which I believe was a Greek philosopher. Now the Greeks, they were around at the same time as ancient Egyptians, and they were students of the ancient Egyptians. And the ancient Egyptians taught the Greeks a lot. And as we already know, that the ancient Egyptian civilization failed because the Romans came in eventually and destroyed a lot of the information that was there and stole whatever they could from ancient Egypt.
All of the leading geologists all agree that America is the oldest continent on the face of the planet.
So as you saw previously, that was a clip from the Mayans' connection to Atlantis, ancient Egyptians, and Cambodia, where I referenced Queen Mu and the Egyptian Sphinx, when the Egyptians was talking about that they came from Atlantis, which is ancient America. And as you saw before in the video, Horace Butlar told you that the city of Jerusalem was in South America and the 11 churches was in the Americas, and they were destroyed by the Catholic Church. And then UBTV told you about the geographical evidence of the cedar trees being found here in the Americas as well, and that the Mik'Maq tribe write Egyptian hieroglyphics to this day. Then you have the 10 Commandments being found in Ohio. So in conclusion, that the world has been looking for the ancient Egyptians and the Hebrew Israelites in Africa when they should have been looking in the Americas. If you like this video, please subscribe and hit the notification bell when I drop a new video. Thank you.